Hey summoners, make sure that you're subscribed to the Mobalytics YouTube channel and hit that bell button, that way you're always up to date and part of our notification squad. Hello summoners and welcome back to Mobalytics, where today we have the patch 9.6 tier list video. Hey guys, so really quickly before we start, this is round 3 of our tier list giveaway, celebrating 100,000 subscribers for the Mobalytics YouTube channel. We really appreciate the support, so continue to subscribe every single week. Every time there's a new tier list, press that like button, press subscribe to continue to get awesome content from us and let us know that you guys really enjoy it. Giving away some awesome prizes here: League of Legends RP cards, big statue from Riot Games and their statue store, and Mobalytics Premium 1-year subscription. So make sure you guys check out the link in the description and the link in the comment section down below for our giveaway. Round 3, so go check it out and press the link. On this patch, we saw quite a few changes that were really interesting, and we saw some nice buffs to certain champions as well. Some of the big highlights that I really like on this patch: number 1, let's talk about Neeko, how she had her bug fix on her auto attacks. This really hurts her on-hit build, and this most likely won't be that good unless you want to go something like Nashor's Tooth, but probably AD Neeko will be a lot worse on this patch, truly because the problem with her was the bug, where she would get multiple autos off and procs twice or sometimes even 3 times in a row with a Rage Blade, and in lane you could just be one hit by her from half HP. It was quite frustrating to play against, and it's great that they were able to nerf that and figure out the hotfix. Also, some big buffs to Urgot as well. These are huge for him because he was one of literally the worst champions on the last patch. He was terrible after they nerfed him so many times, and now he has a new W, and apparently some of the Urgot mains were talking about this for a very long time, and this is finally what they were looking for. He now has his shield on his E, and late game his W, the auto attacking machine gun thing, now can be turned on forever and becomes a toggle at max rank and has no cooldown. This will be really interesting to see how he does. That being said, let's move into top lane. Starting off, we have S tier, Nasus, Yorick, my pick of the patch, which was Kayle and Riven. On this patch, Kayle received some nice changes to her kit. Although some of them were nerfs, like the movement speed ratio on her W, she also got some good buffs, including a nice quality of life buff, which has swapped her adaptive force from ability power to AD, which means last hitting will be a little bit easier, as well as some quality of life changes to casting her W and E should be a little bit easier to use and feel less clunky. That being said, Kayle is doing really well at the moment, and because the players have started to figure out how she works and what you're supposed to build, it seems like Kleptomancy or Fleet Footwork are the build. We have seen some on-hit Kayles going lethal tempo or press the attack, building like an old Kayle would with Nashor's Tooth and Rage Blade, but truly I think some of the build options are like Gunblade or Lichbane, Deathcap. I've even seen some Q-Max Luden's Echo Comet Kayle, and it seems like she does really well, and she's great for climbing in low elo. In fact, I will link a profile that you can check out over at Mobalytics in the description, where you can see what some higher rated or mid-tier players are building on Kayle. This guy usually wins quite a bit in platinum elo on Kayle, so if you're looking to pick her up, play her, check out that profile for sure. There is also a new build with Anatolii running around where she goes AD and going things like Trinity Force, Stair Axe, Titanic Hydra. You say new, but also this has been seen in the past. Even with the old Kayle, there was a tank version of this with like Grasp of the Undying, Trinity Force, Titanic Hydra. This seems to be whatever you call the Korean Kayle build, and it seems to have come back with Conqueror, now that Conqueror is an adaptive keystone and works on pretty much every melee champion in the game. Really cool to see, very interesting. Hard to tell just how good and how oppressive it is yet, but keep an eye out on this for sure. You may see this pop up and be really good in the next coming patches, and if you like Kayle, make sure you try out this build at least to see if you like to play it. There is one top laner that people continually underestimate, and that is Singed. This champion is extremely powerful and does very well in the current meta. He can even take Conqueror if you want, because he has a damage over time as well as being a melee champion. Singed is very powerful, and the reason people constantly underestimate him is because he does have a bit higher of a learning curve than you might expect, given how simple his abilities are. Playing him at a macro level is much more complicated than playing him at a micro or mechanical level, and that is why it may seem at first if you play Singed, he does feel a bit useless, but Singed mains are doing very well at the moment, and he is one of the most annoying champions to play against in all of League. Seriously, if the enemy picks Fiora, Riven, Jax, all these champions that seem really good, these bruisers, just pick Singed because he counters all of them. I recommend highly to try him out. For high elo top lane, the biggest mover here is Kayle. The new version of Conqueror is much better for her than the old version because you were kind of overstacking true damage. Now because it works on abilities and heals you, it's just like the old Fervor of Battle that Kayle loved. You could also go Kleptomancy to scale into your late game, and I've seen it quite a bit versus tank matchups. Kayle is definitely a great high elo top laner. Quinn was my pick of the patch last time. I do like Quinn still, I think she's quite good, but definitely not S tier potential. Vladimir has been OP for several patches and most likely will be nerfed, so make sure you play Vladimir while you can. Also, of course, Riven is still doing very well, and I suspect more Riven nerfs to come through very, very soon. I would not be surprised at all if Riven does eventually receive some nerfs, so abuse her while you can as well. Alright, moving on to the jungle position. In S tier, we have Udyr, Vi, who received some previous buffs in the last couple of patches. Vi is doing very well at the moment. I really like Vi. All Vi players should come back and start playing League again because this champion does great. Adam's pick of the patch was Master Yi, which we'll talk about in just a second, and Nunu and Willump is still S tier despite receiving some nerfs. Nunu and Willump had a big bug fix that made them much easier to play against. One thing that was very annoying is that Nunu and Willump would use their snowball and actually come and kind of teleport into your lane and be impossible to see, and was basically a stealth champion with CC. Was really frustrating. But now that that bug fix has been fixed, they're not as OP, but still very good in S tier potential. And some things that I really like in A tier are things like Jarvan and Shyvana. Adam chose Master Yi as his pick of the patch because he is still successful despite the Conqueror nerfs, and he has other keystone options. Truly what makes this champion good is his Rageblade synergy, and if the item doesn't receive any nerfs, he is able to become fully online as a late game carry with just 2 items, making him scale far too quickly. He can continue to build damage after that, or defensive items, making him very versatile. This means that he's currently far too easy to pop off with him. He's great in low elo because he has more time to scale as well, and he's not going to be punished by really good Nidalee and Rengar mains who just run into your jungle and kill you. Speaking of those champions, moving on to the high elo jungle list, Kha'Zix, Rek'Sai, and Nidalee all are doing well in S tier. I like all 3 of these champions. They are decently high skill cap and they have a pretty big learning curve, but using them and abusing them to carry your solo queue games will be effective in higher and higher elos once you get better at jungle. All of the Nidalee mains are doing well right now, and although that does mean that the data is a little bit skewed, it's just that Nidalee is better and does well in high elo, given the fact that your mid laner is probably something like Zed or Talon or some kind of AD champion at the moment. You have a lot of Riven top lane, Camille top lane, Rengar, that sort of thing. So that AP threat from the jungle is very nice, and that's also why things like Elise are really good and in A tier as well. Having some AP damage from the jungle is nice. Also, Hecarim received a great bug fix on this patch. It's hilarious to call it a bug fix because all they did was just make the champion work the way he's intended and now make his Q properly do more damage. So what this means for us is that we think Hecarim could potentially move up. Right now he's in B tier, but don't be surprised if he moves up to A tier next patch. Alright, moving on to the middle lane, where in S tier we have Morgana mid, Zilean, Ahri, which was mid beast pick of the patch, and Zed. Right now, Ahri has swapped over her build once again to this Glacial Augment setup that we've seen in the past. This rune setup attaching it with the GLP build and the Twin Shadows build, going into Morella Nomicon, Death Cap, or Hourglass. This means that Ahri's win rate has shot way up with this, and it will only increase on this patch with Zoe and LeBlanc getting hit with nerfs. Although LeBlanc and Zoe nerfs aren't enough to push them out of the mid lane, it is allowing picks such as Ahri to really excel because these picks now lose their damage and don't offer the same utility as Ahri and Malzahar. This means that really your only threats are other things like Vladimir, who is also very potent, but is still banned quite a bit. This means Ahri is a less banned option and is still much easier to play than some of the other champions. However, one thing that I cannot stress enough, and I have to absolutely put this in the video for you guys. Let's talk about mid lane really quick and minion dematerializer. This rune has been changed and reverted back to one of its older states. There's only 3 charges now, and it did receive a direct nerf on this patch, but if you look at the starting cooldown, this is really interesting to me and is very confusing at times as well. Riot went ahead and nerfed the starting cooldown originally back to 240 seconds because there was a huge advantage for using dematerializer on the first cannon wave. Now that they've reverted this is a problem. This is something that doesn't make any sense, and it's really strange to see this coming back into the game. They purposefully did this because if one person takes minion dematerializer and the other doesn't, you will automatically dematerialize the first cannon on the first cannon wave and hit level 3. Nowadays, if that is the case, this means you have a huge advantage, and somebody who doesn't take dematerializer gets completely screwed versus someone who does, forcing both players to either take it or both players to not take it. This means that champions like LeBlanc who have really strong level 3 all-ins, Talon, Katarina, you'll probably just take this no matter what despite its nerfs, just because you can hit level 3 and shove and zone your opponent off. I don't understand why this was put back into the game, because this was a problem and they said it was a problem and we're going to nerf it to 240 seconds, then they just revert that change. Very interesting. We'll have to see how this plays out. We could be wrong, but this seems like this just doesn't make any sense. However, there is one thing that does make sense, and that is checking out Mobalytics today at mobalytics.gg. We are your all-in-one platform for improving and getting better at League of Legends. These are not just simple stats. These are not just games that you can see in a match history. We will help you get better. We identify your strengths, your weaknesses, what you can do to improve. We have a GPI for you to check out. We can see your daily activity. You can see what days do you do well on, what days do you do poor on. Is your aggression high? Is your survivability low? What you need to do to get better. So check out Mobalytics today at mobalytics.gg. And moving on to the high elo mid laners, Talon, Zed, and Katarina are 3 assassins that are performing at a high level at the moment. All 3 of these assassins do well in this early game focused meta of fight over the scuttle crab, roam bot lane, get more kills. It almost reminds me of the old Aurelion Soul meta, except these 3 assassins are just quite a bit stronger than that now. Also, Zed just received some buffs that makes him really powerful, and Katarina can use Conquer as a keystone now and helps her even do a bit more damage later on into the game and heal. Moving on to the bottom lane position, where we have Jinx, Ashe, Sivir, and Yasuo all in our S tier. I like all 4 of these champions. You've probably seen a lot more Jinx and Sivir in your games, and these champions seem to be doing quite well. Riot has talked about how Jinx is a nerf candidate, and Sivir has been abused and used as a one trick for a specific streamer to hopefully get masters soon. On top of that, Hewitt's pick of the patch was Xayah in A tier because of her buff, so let's talk about Xayah real quick. Xayah received changes to her W that gave her better scaling into the late game, which lets her fulfill her role as a safe kiting and scaling marksman. Make sure you now max your E into W into Q as your skill order to get the most out of her W changes as fast as possible. Also, with the other changes to the bottom lane, things like Nico leaving the bot lane as quickly as she overtook, because the bug fix to her W damage and the attack speed growth changes have a big effect on her ability to output DPS. Also, you have more Morganas as well, because the update allows her to share most of the meta of bot lane, so her rise in popularity increases the effectiveness of enchanters, but holds down aggressive melee champions like Leona, Rakan, and Thresh. On top of that, enchanters are very popular at the moment, which do very well with Xayah. If Morgana puts a black shield on Xayah, she can run into everybody, and then when she gets dove after the black shield is down, she can use her own ultimate. That's also the case with things like Soraka, where Soraka can help heal and help Xayah kite, and then Xayah can use her own ultimate. That's why she can become better on this patch. Another champion that everybody will be keeping their eye on is Ezreal, and that is because Riot nerfed the double tier build, making it impossible for him to go the Manamune and the Archangels. This is pretty big for him because what made him so strong and so safe is this build, but it may not necessarily totally push him out of the meta because there are other options. There's Blade of the Ruined King. You could go your Gunblade earlier if you truly wanted. Maybe you could go Luden's Echo as well if you just wanted more CDR and more mana. There are other options, but definitely this makes him less safe because that Archangel shield and that extra mana increases your damage, increases your mana, and makes that shield even bigger. So it may push him out of the meta, but potentially he could just swap out for Blade of the Ruined King and still be fine. Moving on to the high-low bottom laners, things that are doing well are Vayne, Lucian, and Draven. Lucian struggles in lower elo, and they cannot usually use him to close out the game and abuse his lightning phase, but if Lucian is doing well in high elo, because the players are making the game end quicker, and because they use him to his full potential, that's totally okay too, and he deserves to be S tier. Also, Vayne is just seeing way more play now. She has a super high win rate for being a hard-to-play champion, and she's extremely successful and popular at the moment. We're seeing a lot more of her in competitive play. It seems like the build is press the attack with domination secondary on Vayne, and that seems to be the best overall rune setup. Also, Draven has started taking press the attack and kleptomancy as a substitute for Conqueror, and it seems like Draven is doing pretty well as well. Alright, moving on to last but definitely not least, let's talk about support. In S tier, Sona, Soraka, Nami, Morgana are just your 4 best enchanters and 4 best supports in the game for climbing. They all do well in lane, and pretty much all of them scale very well into the later parts of the game, which make them all around just good. They're just very darn good. On top of that, in A tier, a couple of mage supports are good, like Zyra, Brand, and Lux, and Thresh and Blitzcrank are okay as hook type champions and pick champions. Let's talk about Thresh really quick. I still do like Thresh after his nerfs on a couple of previous patches. One thing about him though that may be driving his win rate slightly lower than he deserves is because Morgana is very popular. So for anybody who mains Thresh, the recommendation is to just permaban Morgana. Never ever allow yourself to play against Morgana because it is a hard counter pick. But if you play Thresh into some of the other enchanters, Thresh absolutely dumpsters things like Soraka and Sona and does pretty well into Nami. He can be the all-in engaged support that helps beat these champions in lane and don't allow them to scale into late game because he can absolutely crush them. And for the high elo supports, because of that and because the higher elo Thresh mains are not only better at the champion but smart enough to ban Morgana, that is why we are seeing these S tier champions as Sona, Nami, and Thresh. What makes all of these champions good in high elo is, well, they do very well in lane, they're much better at their champion, and because of the scaling on Nami and Sona, they do scale hyper well into the late game, and Nami's laning phase is even a little bit better than Sona. So because of these champions doing well both in lane and late game, they become your S tier supports. Things like Soraka, Morgana, and Janna are good and they're still fine, but they're more abused in higher elo as well. Anyway, that's going to do it for the patch 9.6 tier list video. Make sure you check out Mobalytics today at mobalytics.gg. The link is always in the description down below. It is your all-in-one platform for improving and getting better League of Legends.